Chapter 15 Slipping Through Our Fingers. August 1979. Judging from the smile on James's face, he must have fixed whatever that was with he who must not be named the previous night. On the other hand, Regulus barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined James and his boyfriend making up, fixing their issues with kisses and wandering hands. At one point, Regulus covered his ears like a child, refusing to listen to a parent just so he could stop remembering the sounds James makes when his tongue is in someone else's mouth. Regulus hates that he had to see it. Even though it was only once, the image will never stop haunting him. "Hey, Reg," James greets him, one hand in the pocket of his jeans and a happy glint in his eye. "How'd you sleep?" "Great," he lies. "It's easier the more you do it." "You?" "Like a baby." James glances at the nurse, then wanders over to the window. He's too relaxed. The slope of his shoulders is just north of hitched up, despite his slow saunter across the room. Regulus knows him well enough to be able to tell when he's up to something. And he is definitely up to something right now. Is he waiting for the nurse to leave them alone? Excitement runs through Regulus with embarrassing intensity. It's all he can do not to giggle breathlessly. For an excruciating minute, the only sound in the room is the sharp clinking of glass bottles the nurse arranges. A million potions for Regulus to drink. James keeps his gaze on the window, his hands in his pockets. Curiosity and trepidation fuel the weaker rhythm of Regulus's heartbeat until it's fluttering like a hummingbird against the vines in his chest. He can't take this anymore, so Regulus attempts to make the nurse leave faster through shameless glaring in her direction. "Go away." "All right," she says, totally oblivious to the mental waves Regulus is sending her way. "Call if you need anything." As soon as the door closes behind her, James pivots on his heels. "When do they come back?" "What?" "When do they come back to check in on you again?" James's head tilts towards the door. "How long do we have?" Alarmed by the giddy, Regulus does his best to think. He knows the routines. He should be able to just answer. Except it's hard to focus when James appears to be vibrating from sheer excitement. His eyes twinkle a flash in the fluorescent lights. It's distracting. "Sorry, we'll be here in 2 hours, I think. 2.5? Something like that." "Why, James, shouldn't you be at training?" "It's cancelled," he said without missing a beat. "There's a problem with the pitch, so they've moved practice to tomorrow instead. Now, how are you feeling?" "Huh? A problem with the pitch?" Regulus is certain he's never heard of this ever happening before. Uneasy, he narrows his eyes. Serious, his words prickle the back of his head. James has been missing practice. Is he lying? But if he is, why? On the heels of that thought, there is another one. If James is lying, does Regulus really wants to get into that with him? No. No, he doesn't. James is here with him and he looks happy to be. Selfishly, that's all Regulus cares about. And he gets to be selfish, doesn't he? He's the one dying. His days are numbered. Who cares if James is skipping a practice? He's got decades to play Quidditch after Regulus is 6 feet under. With a little shrug, Regulus says, "I feel the same. Not great, but not awful. Why?" "Can you stand?" James asks him. "On your own, I mean." Curious, Regulus slides off the bed. The floor is cold under his bare feet. He winces, holds his breath for a second. Nothing happens and he smiles. He's not shaking. His knees aren't buckling. He's steady, and that's a small miracle. It's a good day, despite the lack of sleep and the horrible thoughts of, "Stop it." "I can stand." It comes out a little more celebratory than he would have liked. But if James picks up on how delighted he is by such a simple feat, he doesn't say. Excellent. James beams, then gestures towards Regulus' clothes on the small dresser by the bed. Put some clothes on, quickly. We only have 2 hours. James turns to give him some privacy. Regulus pulls out the tube connected to his arm and hooks it next to the drip bag. He's learned how to do it on his own. It gives him a sense of control and autonomy, both of which he's losing little by little as he waits away in the hospital bed. There's something wonderfully thrilling about doing something you know you're not supposed to do. A little danger can be quite intoxicating, so Regulus fumbles around the room as fast as his legs will allow. His head is running at 1,000 miles per hour, trying to guess what James has planned. Where are we going? Regulus asks, fighting with his black joggers to get them on as fast as humanly possible. They are too big on him, the bones at his hips poking out so sharply he might draw blood if he bumps into someone. Trying his best not to think of the state of his body, Regulus pulls off his pyjama top and grabs his t-shirt. His hands spasm and he drops it. His fingers aren't as nimble as they used to be. Painfully, Regulus remembers what it feels like to catch snitches at impossible angles and speeds. Before he can dwell too long in the memories, he shakes his head and picks his shirt up from the floor. When he straightens, James is staring at him. Self-conscious, Regulus shows the top and looks away. He doesn't want James to see his ribs, or the way his abs have smoothed out from disuse. He used to be lean and fit. Now he's just skinny, painfully so. Right, James clears his throat. He steps up to the window and opens it, whipping his wand out of his pocket. We're going for a ride. Regulus isn't sure what to make of this, mostly because he has absolutely no idea what James means. At least, not until he waves his wand and... James! Regulus admonishes when a broom flies right into James's outstretched hand. Where did you put that? The roof. I've done all sorts of exploring. You know how I am. James shoots him a grin and shoves the window open a little wider. With the sort of ease that comes with years and years of practice, he settles on his broom, gets comfortable a little farther back than he would usually sit, and gestures for Regulus to come closer. Come on. I said we're going for a ride. I meant it. Regulus frowns at the shiny mahogany, clearly brand new. His own is still in pieces. He didn't let Effie take it to a repair shop. There is no point. I can't. James's bright smile dims slightly, and Regulus hates that he is the reason. Why not? I can't ride on my own anymore. You won't be. You'll be riding with me, and I'll make sure nothing bad happens. Come on, Reg. We've only got 2 hours, and I bet we can catch the start of sunset before I have to bring you back. It isn't even a choice, really. Regulus would go with James anywhere if James asked him to. It's hell on his lungs, but he manages to get himself up on the ledge. James keeps one hand on his broom handle, then curls his other thigh around Regulus's hip to help him on. Will it even hold us? He asks before he steps forward. There isn't much of a drop. The hospital is built into an old Muggle department store, and there's a whole roof just beneath him. Still, it's enough to worry him. The drop will hurt like hell. Did you forget you are a wizard all of a sudden? James rolls his eyes. Charms, Reg. Enough to make this the best broom you've ever sat on. So, let's go. Regulus keeps a firm grip on James's shoulder and swings his leg over, then wraps his hands around the broom handle just below where James has curled around the wood. He missed this more than he realized. Open air underneath him, smooth wood against his palm, and cushioning charms to keep him comfortable. Has it really only been a little over a month since he did this all of the time? You have to scoot back or the weight will be off, murmurs James, breaking him from his reverie. Oh, Merlin, save him. Regulus adjusts, so his back presses against James's chest, and he's hit with the sudden realization that he's never been this close to James in this capacity. His back is hot in all of the places it connects to James's chest, and the soft blow of James's breath on his neck is enough to make him shiver. Are you cold? James's arms tighten around Regulus, bracketing him in. No, I'm fine. Regulus is not fine. James's arms are firm and solid, and they are very much all around him. James is all around him. His legs cage Regulus's hips. Salazar sucks. Why did he agree to this? Why did he ever think this would be a good idea? But then the broom moves and all thoughts of panic fall silent in Regulus's head. James flies away from the window. He tilts the nose of the broom up, and suddenly the whole of London is at Regulus's feet. Holy shit, he breathes, staring at the glass building that catch the early evening sky. This is incredible, right? I feel like we spend so much time flying around in the garden at the manor that we forget this exists too. Can muggles see us if they look up? Charms, love. James says it so offhandedly and in tone so blasé, Regulus almost doesn't catch it. It's joking, a little playful, and he knows it's James reminding him he's a wizard and there are always around muggles catching sight of them. Did you forget? His tone suggests. But it's the tacked-on addition, the exchange of reg for love, for the second time that makes Regulus feel suddenly, well, bold. Higher, he tells James. What? Go higher, I want to see more. Reg. He likes love better. Reg sounds oddly impersonal, following in its footsteps. Higher, James. I want to see the whole city. It will be harder to breathe if we go too high. I don't care. It's hard to breathe all of the time. Besides, you said you will make sure nothing bad happens, right? Regulus feels the huff of irritated breath against his neck more than he hears the sigh. All right, but if it gets bad, you have to tell me. It's a long fall to the ground and this broom isn't as good as my old one. It won't fly as fast. He wants to tell James it doesn't matter. He's dying, so what difference does it make if he dies now versus later? Time, maybe, but that's not guaranteed either. He gets weaker every day. There's a clock ticking, a countdown somewhere, and none of them know where it is. But Regulus forgets all about it once London spread out underneath him. The streets are small from up here, like veins running through the city to breathe life into concrete. He can see the River Thames, winding its way along. Buildings of all sizes and colors, though most are made of glass. He grew up in London. The borough of Islington was his home for a long, long time. But he's never seen London like this, and it fills him with something akin to longing. Will he ever see it this way again? What do you think? James is much closer to Regulus's ear than he anticipated. Its nose brushed through his curls. Unintentionally, he's sure. It's beautiful. Do you ever think what life is like as a muggle? I mean, we learned about them and what they do. Their telephones and cars and strange jobs. I feel terrible for the postman, you know. Owls are far better and more efficient. Regulus can't help but laugh. I'm sure the owls are happy you think so. It's difficult to have a conversation when all he wants is to lean back and sink into James's chest, to feel the arms that bracket him come around and hold him properly. But he won't let himself relax. If he does, he's sure he will give himself away. It will be a cold day in hell before he risks looking like a fool when James tells him it's not like that. This isn't anything more than James taking pity on him and offering to take him out of his depressing hospital room. It's a nice, friendly thing to do. So Regulus remains stiff, as upright and untangled in James as he can manage. The small bit of distance between their bodies feels enormous. If you were a muggle with no clue about our world, what would you like to do? James asked, breaking Regulus from his spiral. And I mean zero idea that magic exists. Regulus squints at the city down below. He can't really make out people. They look more like ants from up here. I've never really thought about it. I've only ever wanted to play Quidditch. Well, you're a muggle in this scenario and have no idea Quidditch exists. So, what do you want to do? The fact that Quidditch doesn't exist for muggle is criminal. Focus, Reg, James admonishes, nudging him gently. What would you do? Regulus mulls it over for a moment, soars through his interests, the little things he enjoys, and finally says, I'd work at a bookstore, I think. I can see you working in a bookstore even now. Don't make fun of me. It's not a bad thing. I like to read, you know? James laughs softly. I know. I'm sure you passed all of your newts with flying colors. This makes Regulus flinch. He doesn't want to think about his exams, considering they have no bearing on his life anymore. The results will arrive soon, but he's hoping Effie and Monty don't bring them to him. What about you? He asked to redirect the conversation. What would you do? Oh, I'd still work in sports, I think. Maybe, what's the one? Rugby? Rugby? That one. James lets one hand off the broom handle and pumps his fist in the air. It's testimony to his skill as a flyer that the broom doesn't dip to one side from the movement. Rugby. I think I'd play that. I can see that. Have you ever watched a game? No, but I hear it's pretty violent. Regulus makes an uncommittal noise. Quidditch can be pretty violent. We have flying balls that would happily kill you if they are hit just right. Which is why Quidditch is the superior sport and muggles would go crazy for it. Regulus is about to respond when James continues in a burst of excitement. Oh, the sun is going to set soon. I know we are running out of time, but you want to see this, Reg. I promise. Truthfully, he doesn't care about the time. He doesn't care if the healers come to his room and find him gone. It isn't illegal, the thing they are doing. It's dangerous, sure, but Regulus trusts that James put the right charms in place. No muggles will spot them. Besides, who's going to arrest a dying boy? Here it comes, James says, his chin on Regulus's shoulder. He points toward the horizon, but there is no need. The sky is slowly turning to a myriad of colors, hues of purple and red and orange and gold. If Regulus thought the city was beautiful before, it's nothing compared to what it is now. The sky is indescribable, even for him. There aren't enough words in the English language to do it justice. Not from this perspective, as high as the clouds, the curve of the earth clear, and the whole sky turning from blue to something spectacular. Wow, Regulus breathes. His fingers gone slack on the broom. James has it. He isn't worried. This is incredible. James doesn't answer him. What is there to say? Regulus doesn't even think there are words to express his gratitude to James for showing this to him. He couldn't have done this on his own. Thank you, he settles for, said softly under his breath, for this. Of course, Reg. It's what friends are for. Friends. The whole moment shatters, a thin layer of glass all around them destroyed in an instant. It's such an offhanded comment, another one of those words James says without meaning them. And yet, it's everything to Regulus. Or more accurately, it's the reminder that he's nothing. He's not special. He's just a friend. The last hour feels tainted but by the reminder. No matter how lovely this is, it will never be more than what it is now. I think we should go back, he says, struggling to keep the cold from his voice. He's tired, emotionally and physically drained. I don't want the healers to panic. They will call Effie and Monty. It will be a whole mess. James seems to hesitate but says, Sure, just hold on. Regulus is careful to wrap his hands around the broom far from James's. He longs to sit forward to separate his back from James's chest, but there's nowhere for him to go that wouldn't upset the broom's balance. It's a relief when James helps him back through the window, though his legs and knees are weak. He barely manages to crawl back in his hospital bed, breathing labored and chest-tight. It's a scratch, a terrible drag against his throat, close digging, pulling from him the thing he feared most the moment he realized it was coming. The coughing fit is violent, blood and flowers spewed all over his lap. Crimson dots the sheet, ruining them, and full flowers collect in his lap, hues of purple and petals of snow white, bits of yellow all speckled with blood. The floor is covered in full blossoms. He is delirious, head spinning from the broom ride and the lack of oxygen from coughing for so long. Hands on him, shouting, he thinks. He's not sure. Regulus blinks and oh, there are healers everywhere. They are urging him to sit back, Mr. Black, and take the rest. Don't push yourself. He doesn't fight them. He has no fight left. They reconnect his tube, get him comfortable, and someone waves their wand to exchange the bedding. He's fading, slipping into the black. Like a flickering light, he catches sight of James standing off to the side. He's curled in on himself, out of the way of the frantic healers. His eyes are wide behind his glasses, his stricken expression raw, open. There are tears on his cheeks, twin trails Regulus never seen before. He looks terrified, his gaze trapped on the full flowers a healer scoops up and into one of Regulus's many jars. For the first time since this all started, Regulus wonders if maybe the sunshine smiles and boisterous jokes are shallow things. Maybe if Regulus digs deep enough, he will find that James is like him, running out of light, out of hope. It's a thought that rings strangely hollow. Before Regulus can dwell on it, the world slides away and darkness pulls him under. Not for the first time, James thinks about the time turner. He read about it once in a book whose names he can't remember, but the idea of it has stayed with him. Second chances, more time. His mind whirls with possibilities while Monty paces the short stretch of carpet in front of their living room fireplace, hands under his glasses to push them up so he can rub his eyes. Distantly, James recognizes it as a gesture he himself does often, especially when he's anxious. Effie sits with her leg folded under her. Parchment litters their low coffee table. It's organized into neat piles she's designated into 3 categories: definitely not, possibly, and hopefuls. The pile of definitely not includes the American healer who could do little more to shrug his shoulders and apologize for his shortcomings. The one who suggested palliative care for Regulus, like resignating themselves to his death, is the only course of action. There are plenty in the possibly pile, but only a few have returned their alls. It's the hopefuls pile that causing the most stress. On the armchair, Sirius sits with his elbows on his knees and his fingers stippled under his chin. I have plenty left from my Uncle Alfred, and the magpie's salary is damn good. I don't want you to shoulder the cost of this one alone. You've both done more than enough. It's a lot of galleons, Sirius, warns Monty, still pacing. More than your salary can afford. Plus, you've got your whole life ahead, and he's my little brother. There's an edge to Sirius's voice. It's pleading. It's raw. I love him, and he's slipping through my fingers, and I don't know how to keep holding on. I don't care about the rest of my life if he's not in it. James glances at Remus, perched on the arm of Sirius's chair. His expression is called into careful neutrality, but James can see the anxiety in his amber eyes. Sirius's mood, as tempestuous as ever, and made worse by the late hour, has started to affect them all. No one blames him for it. It's his brother who's brought them all here after all. Sirius, Effie says gently, reaching for a piece of parchment from the possibly pile. Monty and I have run the numbers. We can afford at least 2 more healers without any assistance. We don't want you to worry about the finances if we can help it. And right now, we can. But what happens when the money runs out? When there are no galleons left? James flinches. He's alone on the sofa under the same blanket that he and Regulus cuddled with during Christmas break. It's the middle of summer and arguably too warm, but something about it brings him comfort, especially in the midst of so much tension. The healers called this morning to inform them of Regulus's fit last night. The fire call was muffled from the kitchen, but James caught the gist. Blood and full flowers and worsening, and he's stable now. James's eyes are still swollen from crying. He hadn't meant to do it in front of Regulus. So far he's kept it together for everyone. Well, everyone except Remus. They haven't talked about James's breakdown, about the awful way he sobbed in their kitchen over cold tea. Remus was letting him pretend it didn't happen. But last night, watching Regulus spill bloodied flowers all over was too much. James is strong, but he's not invincible. There was no power on earth mighty enough to keep James's composure in check in the face of the ugly reality of Regulus's illness. He'd pull himself together by the time dawn arrived, and he was expected in the kitchen, but he's all too aware of how precarious his mask is. Now, in this living room steeped in tension, cracking like a ceramic pot left outside during a harsh winter, James is fighting an uphill battle just to keep up the pretense. Remus, the only one who has seen the truth of James's despair, looks jaded. He keeps glancing between James and Sirius, and James and Monty and Effie, and Sirius and James again. Stretched too thin by how much he worries, just like the rest of them. We'll keep throwing money at it, Sirius says emphatically, blue eyes bright and shining. We'll owe every healer on the planet. Twice if we have to. And I'll get a second job. Quidditch and something I can do on the weekends. You usually have practice on the weekends, Pats, Remus reminds him quietly. He runs his fingers through Sirius's hair. It's long. He hasn't bothered to trim it since Regulus was admitted to St. Mungo's. You can't work 2 jobs. Not without quitting the Magpies, and you know Regulus wouldn't want that. Monty quits pacing and settles on his knees next to Effie. She leans into him, content to let him take over sorting through the healers. We've sent 25 alls this last month alone. Nearly half have responded with interest, and only a handful have said it's entirely out of their wheelhouse. And there are still at least 20 healers left to try. What if none of them work? James wants to ask. He has to bite his tongue to keep him from voicing the question. What if none of these healers figure out what's wrong? He doesn't know how many galleons his parents have spent so far. Between the private room at St. Mungo's, the tests, the potions, the healers, more tests, more potions. He knows the cost is steep. Yet Monty and Effie seem entirely unconcerned. If anything, they've opened their pockets farther. Not even James knows how much sits in the potter's vaults at Gringotts. Will it be enough? Will any of it be enough? He looks at Sirius, who slid off the armchair and onto the floor across from Effie and Monty. His expression is resolute. We have another hour or two before we have to go home. Right, Moons? Yeah, it's no rush. Brilliant. Then I say we write a few more letters and worry about the money later. Effie reaches across the coffee table to lay a hand on his. Don't worry about anything, please. Monty and I will take care of everything we can. You and Regulus are our family. Do you understand? But we have the galleons, Monty adds, adjusting his glasses on his nose so he can read the fine print on a piece of parchment. All we need from you is a little help with these letters, and maybe some of Remus's famous tea. Remus's mouth twitches and he gets to his feet. Of course. James, do you? It's a distraction. Remus has never needed help making tea, nor would he need help with the max since he has his wand. But he knows. He can read James as well as any book, and he surely sees the tense set of his shoulders, the hard clench of his jaw. 2.5 hours have passed since he came back from Quidditch practice to find Effie and Monty in the living room. Sirius and Remus appeared shortly after, and the five of them once again sorted through healers, discussed finances, and tried not to mention the words Regulus and dying in the same sentence. Hope is tenuous, fickle thing, and acknowledging they are running out of it feels far more dangerous than draining their Gringotts vaults. Money can come back. Regulus cannot. You sure you are all right? Asked Remus, bending down to fiddle with the kettle. You know you don't have to tell me, but I wish Sirius would just let us help without arguing. James's voice is quiet, barely a whisper. Remus is close enough they won't be overheard. Ma is really upset over the whole thing. I've seen her crying so many times, before St. Mungo's and after. He doesn't want to be a burden. He's a black. You know how they are. James snores laugh. Their stubbornness is an infamous trait. Still, talk to him. You are the only one he really listens to around here. My parents will throw money at this until there's nothing left, and they don't want anything from either of you. The situation is fine for us. Let us keep helping. He'll come around. I think these little meetings are hard for him. He cries too. A lot of the time. He's being strong about it around Regulus and you, but... Remus frowns, and James can tell he might not have meant to say all of that. Anyway, it's stressful for him. We're giving it all we've got, but Regulus isn't getting better. James knows what Remus wants to say, but won't for the sake of him. Still snaps when someone mentions Regulus's worsening condition and what it means. They sit in comfortable silence until the tea is ready. James helps carry his mug and Effie's, and Remus manages to hold his, Sirius's, and Monty's. The living room is quiet except for the scratch of quills on parchment. James takes his seat on the sofa again, steaming mug of tea clutched close to his chest. He stares into the hearth and tries to empty his head of any thoughts at all. It's not easy. Avoidance won't slow down the progress of Regulus's illness or bring the right healer to their doorstep. Mostly he wonders what he would do if he had one of those time turners. There is a clock ticking down a little more each day, and he feels powerless to stop it. But maybe, if he could just turn time back a little, if he could have a smidgen more of it, he would do it all differently. But should have, would have, could have never changed anything. Time isn't turning back. It isn't slowing down. And with every day that passes, Regulus gets a little closer to an end no one wants to accept, but will be forced to anyway.